The keynote for today, a lot of keynotes I see at events sometimes are sort of high level. This is very much how do I do this kind of stuff. This is hands-on. So I think you're going to enjoy this. Chris Poulter joins us to give the keynote. He has extensive experience in law enforcement and the military. He delivers OSINT training and has a deep background with being able to relay to people, how do I do things in OSINT? He's the founder and CEO of OSINT Combine. If you have not checked out OSINT Combine, I invite you to do so. They have a lot of free tools and stuff on their site for OSINT and worth checking out. Contrary to the wild rumors after Heather Honey's talk, Chris, who is from Australia, is actually not here to defend the reputation of koalas, but he may do so if required. Here's Chris, the OSINT wonder from down under. Take it away.
Thanks, John. Really appreciate that. And thanks, Micah. And a warm thanks to the SANS team and all the hard work that goes into this. What is turning out to be a pretty amazing event. As John sort of alluded to, we're going to get in a little bit in the weeds today. We're going to talk about OSINT efficiency, extending and building tools. We're going to go on a bit of a journey. And I think that's important. So everyone will get something out of today and how we'll transition between high-level concepts through to, okay, this is how we can do it. This is some of the effect we're going to have. And I'll also call out what we're not going to touch on today. But before I get underway, John, can you just confirm screen's looking good? Audio's okay?
Everything's good.
Okay, let's get into it. All right, so a bit of background about myself and our company. So Australian veteran owned and operated business, as John was alluding to, down here in Australia where the koalas are vicious. We provide training, software and services globally to whether it's law enforcement, military, F500s, ASX 200s. And our whole mission, which is going to kind of lead into what we're going through today, is around developing enduring OSINT capability. And that is beyond just using tools, just getting training, or perhaps outsourcing services. It's about how do you develop internal capability around tool development. Some of the stuff we do, don't need to go into that. Let's focus on what we want to get out of the actual talk today. So we're going to go and look at capability development. So we're going to look at that as a concept. And then we're going to look at getting into the weeds around bespoke development and some of the opportunities that exist, and then some of the limitations. And then we're going to go through the different methods we can do that around the browser, and then some custom tooling. And again, where it's not going to be a lesson in how to code, we're going to talk about different concepts, how you can go do it with a low barrier to entry, to then give you a platform to move on for the next sort of stage. But we're going to talk about takeaways. So why are we starting with takeaways up front? So everyone can get something out of today. So the first thing, if you're not in the technical aspect, you're still going to learn what is possible and then how easy it is. So if you're a manager or you're a program developer and you're looking to, okay, I want to build out an OSINT capability. What skills am I going to bring into the workforce? Am I bringing in trainers? Am I bringing in developers? If I bring in someone who's technical, what can they do? And so that's what I want sort of the managerial sort of aspect to focus on is what is possible and how easy it is, so you can have those conversations with your staff and give them the freedom to go and explore. For other people, it'll be learning how to do something. It'll be enhancing your workflows you've got now, creating some efficiencies. We're not doing, commercial tool development and those sort of things in this talk. It's about how to do things quickly. So you can create efficiencies in your workflow. So for the practitioners, that's where that sort of sits. And for those who are new to coding, just to remove some of the scary aspects of what staring down code is like, and how we can do it without complex environments. And then the third takeaway, for those who are just seasoned programmers or use other languages, say they're into Python, because we're gonna be doing a little bit of web-based development today as opposed to command line stuff. And so this is perhaps thinking of other ways to do what you already know, or looking for some more efficiencies in how you might be able to collaborate and contribute, whether it's to the community, to your work environment, or as part of your private investigations. So just some key takeaways we're going to look at today. So let's look at OSINT capability development, just as a concept. And this is so we can align ourselves to what we're actually trying to achieve with this topic in the talk today, but then as you move forward. So organizational alignment. When you're doing capability development, it's obviously going to be aligned to what you're doing. Now, an organization can be, I mean, it can be an individual, it can be a group of people, it doesn't really matter. But you need to bound that around or align that to what is your remit, what are your boundaries internally and legally. And the legal aspect is important because if you're operating on behalf of someone and you're doing, say, scraping, what are your legal exposures that you need to be aware of? What controls are you going to put in place to manage that so that if you are building tools, what is the liability of having those tools running in your operating environment? Things like attribution, they're all really important because that comes down to accountability and reputation. And then there's time, and we're going to get into that a little bit deeper as we go through from an efficiency perspective. The next part in the development should be looking at, understand what you have in front of you. You've got personnel skills and knowledge. You may have existing tools, and it's how can you extend those? How can you bring in some of the things you're doing? And a lot of organizations will be doing this in terms of they've got staff on their books who are building out bespoke and custom tools. And they'll be well aware of the reality around why people purchase commercial tools, but also the adaptability you get from building your own tools. So understanding who is in front of you, and that may also drive the type of people you're looking for in the future. So if you talk about OSINT from a work perspective or a job opportunity perspective, what are some of the characteristics and skill sets that you're looking for that maybe you'll take out of today and look for in the next hire that you go for? And then the end state, the things we always want to strive for: efficacy, efficiency, and having an enduring effect as part of our OSINT capability, whether that is at the lower end where you're just doing it for educational purposes, or whether you're doing it at an operational capacity as part of a defined mission set. So all things to sort of consider. So let's look at what we're capability development and how that leads into today's talk. So the first one's obviously training, in-house and external. Everyone be aware of that. Then services, do you go and build or go and outsource support to get your OSINT working effectively? Do you use internal resources and how that sort of looks? Do you use a hybrid model? But then tooling is where some of the conjecture comes around. Do you buy commercial tools to create scale and efficiency? I mean, we have a commercial platform, but something we also advocate is what can you do internally that is cost effective and adaptive to changing environments? And that is where bespoke development comes in. And that is what we're going to focus on today. We're going to talk about bespoke development. So this just rounds out the OSINT capability development pathway or glide path, if you will. And the bit that we want to narrow down on is, okay, we've got skills, we've got internal staff. We're going to look at bespoke development to achieve what we're after. So let's start focusing on that aspect. Now, I said we're going to go on a bit of a journey. So this might be a reflection of some of the pathways that people are on now in terms of what they're doing and where they want to get to. And so this is, I guess, the journey to freedom, OSINT freedom, if you will. So you have a full gamut of capability within your organization. So if you look at the start, and a bit of a sad face, we rely on other tools and to manually scrape data. Two major problems with that is if you're relying on other tools, as great as that is for efficiency, when those tools break or aren't available, can you still achieve your mission? And so that normally leads us to having a fundamental understanding. And that's why you'll find most of the OSINT training that is out there is not tools-based. It's skills-based and foundational skills, pulling apart browsers, understanding how to use JSON, pull apart JSON data and looking at web requests. That's all fundamental stuff where you can repeat that regardless of what tools are or aren't there. but we want to create efficiencies. So we start to, as we go on our journey to build, develop tools, is we learn to capture data from the browser using network traffic. That's really dipping our toes into understanding what data can we grab that is under the hood. Because we see what's on the website. You know, you go to Facebook or you go to Twitter, and you see what is presented to the user. But we know there is so much more happening underneath it. How do we tap into and go and grab that? And that's a really key thing that we want to look at today, is extending that and leveraging that a little bit further. And so the next part of that journey is we look to extend the browser with some custom coding. So we do need to use, you know, some code, but we can use our OSINT skills to go and find that. Then over time, we can learn what that means. And that's why we're going to focus on JavaScript and web-based tools today, because these are the things where we can naturally progress to creating efficiency and having our own tool set that we can adapt based on the requirements. And it keeps us out of the command line. It keeps us out of bespoke environments or custom environments where we may not have access to. People in, whether it's military or law enforcement environments, may not be able to install complex, you know, Python environments and systems and databases. You may be left to, I can only use a browser. Okay, can we still create tools in that environment? Yes, we can. That's where it leads us to, we want to plan and build our own tools as part of our pathway to bespoke development. What does that mean? We are adaptive to changing environments, and we see that now, the deplatforming, where a lot of groups are moving to other platforms outside of mainstream media, and that may be the place you need to go and find your threat actor. They may not be on mainstream media, and they may not have been on there at all. And so if you need to go and start collecting some of those bits and of information from those areas, how do we do that effectively? The downside, though, of course, is the skills burden. So there is a barrier to entry, but it's not massive. And I'm hoping today, by the end of this, you can see where we can get to, and you can see that there is a workable path to create these skills internally. And while we're sort of talking about that, the glide path there, as you're building internal tools, it'll allow you to have more robust conversations with the commercial providers as well, who are doing that at scale. You know, like I said, we do this at scale as well with our own platform. And you want to be able to have those robust conversations so you can, you know, get through the snake oil. You can understand what is occurring and what is possible. And that allows you to have a really deep relationship, you know, with your providers as well, but also staying adaptive to what you need right now, rather than having to rely on an external party to provide what you need. So part of that will involve some planning questions. So you'll be asking yourself, what am I trying to achieve? That's probably the key question, because that's going to drive which path you take: training, services, tooling, commercial tools, or bespoke development. What am I trying to achieve? Do I need to share the tool with others? That kind of matters to a small degree around, do I need to work on the user interface? Is there things I need to make it so it's workable? Or am I literally just building this for myself because I've got a immediate and bespoke requirement right now where I just need to get some data more effectively? I don't need to make it look pretty. So I can look at just using basic templates. Can I extend an existing tool? Is someone already done the hard work for me? Now, one of the limitations there is, you know, having to understand what their code base may be doing. Or in this case, if we're looking at extending browsers, which we'll do first, can I just extend what I already have in front of me? And that's sort of a key thing we want to assess, so we don't reinvent the wheel. The concept I'm going to talk about during the scraping part is DIY. Don't repeat yourself. It's a coding principle, and it's a practical coding principle. Use repeatable code wherever you can. We sort of touched on this. Do I care about usability, output, or both? If I just need the output, then let's just get the bare bones. And the tools I'm going to show you that we've sort of built today on the fly, it's just bare bones. We don't need fancy stuff. Or if we're going to share this with a team and we're going to build this over time and continue to add to it, then we need to start thinking about usability and building that into a plan. And that gets a little bit more complex. It's beyond the scope of what we're covering off on today, but it's a consideration. And then what is the time cost benefit? It might be great to build your own tools, but if it takes you 5 weeks to build it, and you could have just scraped the data manually in 1 week, well, that's just part of your assessment and that's part of your process. So these are all good planning questions. Do I need to maintain the tool? That's going to talk about your enduring concept, which we touched on in the glide path for capability development. If I need to maintain it and I've built this thing that now the organization relies on, I need to think about that for future hires. Do I have a single point of failure now in the skill set for the person who built the tool? And this is where you start to work out, okay, do I outsource that for large scale tools and I just want staff who are robust to build their own stuff, their own bespoke requirements? And that's what the tooling today is about. It's not to create or push out competing aspects from a commercial side, because that's why commercial entities exist. They can focus on large scale tool development and maintenance. The internal side is solving immediate problems with efficiency. And then what is the minimum viable product? What we're talking about there is not in the commercial sense. We're saying, what is the bare minimum I need to do to achieve my end state? And that's what bespoke development is all about. I just need to solve the problem because that's what we're here to do. Okay, so we're going to start to get into the weeds now. We're going to look at extending the browser. And people will be familiar with this. And as we sort of mentioned on the journey, we're going to ease into how we can start to do things in the OSINT environment. So extending the browser, we're going to look at bookmarklets. And this is Bookmarklets 101. This is where a lot of people will start because they're already viewing data, they're already viewing web pages, and they want to just extract a little bit what's under the hood, or they want to manipulate what's in front of them. And this is a key part with bookmarklets. So what's a bookmarklet? That's probably the first question if you haven't heard of them before. A bookmarklet is a bookmark in your web browser that just contains some JavaScript and adds essentially new features to the browser, which you've custom built. So you can then push JavaScript to the current page, and it can do things like inspect the page and change the page. And that's something sort of to consider there is we can send bookmarks around. We have a bookmark stack on our website with a whole bunch of different tools. You could now, hopefully at the end of this talk, extend that for your own bespoke requirements. So things you can do, you can change colors of background. You can search social media for any highlighted text and allow you to pivot really quickly without tools, without going into other people's tools, just from within your browser. And we're going to do a demonstration of that in a minute. And then probably the key one that most people are after, extracting data from websites. So when you're looking for those user IDs, you're looking for the JSON data that's under the hood, it's using bookmarklets to go and get that so you can quickly move around. And doing that without having to install things like Chrome extensions. And if you think about from an operational security perspective or an attribution side, the amount of plugins and extensions that exist that seem really good, and then down the track, they either evolve or are found out to be malware. These are things we need to be considerate of if we don't have access to review what that source code is doing, or we don't have the skill set to go and review that. So we want to be able to do it ourselves if we can. So how do we actually create bookmarklets? In Chrome, you just go to your bookmark manager, or in Firefox, your library, and Control-Shift-O should get you there in Chrome. Add a new bookmark, and then you just paste the JavaScript in there. Now, the first thing you'll be like, well, I don't know JavaScript. And, this is what it looks like. You'll see on the left there, JavaScript : that's the protocol. And then the function on the right. The JavaScript code is in the middle, but you need all the scaffolding there as well to help you out. And you don't need to remember it. So we're all OSINT practitioners. That's why we're at this talk, right? Just go and Google sample bookmarklets, sample code. There is a plethora of example OSINT specific bookmarklets. So the takeaway today is not how to write that code yourself and be comfortable with the actual terminology and structure. It's to go and find the information you need, understand how you can use that now, and plug that into your existing environment. So you see on the right there, add a new bookmark, and then that example there, which we're going to go and demonstrate, is just changing the background of a page to pink, and that is manipulating the page in front of you. Another one is extracting your images on a web page, and that's the code you need. So what we eventually are saying is we're going to take or create an array of items, and we're going to take all the elements in a page. So HTML, markup language, a page is constructed with tags. And so we're going to have an image tag in there, or throughout a web page, which is all the images that are referenced. And that's how they're displayed. That's how your browser reads it. It finds all those image tags and then displays them for you and interprets it. Then we're just going to cycle through that. And in this case, I'm just going to send it to the console. But let's do that live so you actually see the practical aspect of it. So let me jump over to my screen here. And the first thing we're going to look at here is bookmarks. So I'm just in Chrome and I've got my bookmarks set up. And all I'm going to do is come under here, under my bookmarks bar, and click on the three little dots and just go to add new bookmark. I'm going to type pink background. And then the URL, this is where you put the JavaScript code. So under the URL, whilst it doesn't say put bookmarklet here, the URL is where you're putting the JavaScript. And like I said, rather than go through and explain the minutia of the scaffolding and the details of the code itself, in a high level, what we're doing is we're accessing the document, changing the body style and the body style's background to pink. That's the high level aspect for it. Then we just save it. But what you want to do when you're looking for those extensions is go and find them yourself by using Google. So if I come to news.com.au now, or in fact, what I'll do is I'll go to another site here, and you'll see there I've just created this bookmarklet. I click on it, and there we go. It's changed the background. So now we're manipulating what's in front of us. Okay, let's go a little bit further. Let's go and look at something more OSINT related. Let's create a function where any website I'm on, I can highlight the text, click my little bookmark, which is in my bookmark bar, and go and search Twitter. Because that might be part of your workflow. Rather than having to go to Twitter and search for it or spin up a custom search engine, you just want a little button you can click. So if I go to add new bookmarklet, and I'll call this Twitter search. And I'm going to paste the code in here. And what this code is saying is I'm going to open a window. And whilst that is small and potentially hard to read right now, I'm going to have this up on the big screen so you'll be able to make it a little bit easier. And all the code from today is going to be available. And then, like I said, you're going to Google snippets and you're going to see how they work over time. But I'm saying open a window for Twitter search. And I've just done the URL there, question equals. And then all I'm saying is take the selected text, because we have these fantastic built-in functions into JavaScript, which we can just leverage. We don't need to go and reinvent the wheel. It's a very accessible language with a lot of really useful things already built in. So it's going to take the selected text and then search. So rather than getting into the weeds of the actual code, let's just look at how this will work, and then you'll get the idea of how you can go and find stuff yourself. So I'm on news.com.au. You'll see there I've got Twitter search and the other one, pink background there. I can grab any of the text now, and all I'm going to do is just click Twitter search. And you'll see there, it puts the URL as the window open. And that's the search term that is found. So now if I'm doing this from an efficiency side, all of a sudden I can be like, okay, well, I'm finding text and I'm searching. I can go and get those different elements. And this is where bookmarklets play a really cool role. Okay, what if, and we'll go one more, what if I want to get all the images from a website so I can just quickly view them? I'm on OSINT Combine, or actually I'm on news.com or any site like that, and I just want to get the websites, images. I don't want to have to scroll through everything. What I can do is create another bookmarklet. And this one's a little deeper, but just to, again, show you what it can do, images. And in this case, I've got some functions off screen, which, like I said, the code will all be available. And I'm taking every element by its tag name being image, and that's in the other deck. So if your eyes are glazing over because we're talking about code, that's fine. It's to show you what we're trying to achieve or explain the concept. I like to talk about things as ideas and then seeing the results, and you can sort of reverse engineer it from there. So the idea is we're just going to go through every tag on the website that's got image, and we're just going to send all that to the console. And what that means is I can just have a catalog of the images that are on the website. So if I'm on OSINT Combine, I'm going to bring up my developer tool so you can see the console here. And all I'm doing is clicking images, and that's it. It's that simple to scrape all the images from the website. Now, the extension for this, or the next level, is, okay, I want to now go and open these in a new window. You can then start to look at some of those more functions, or combine what we just did. Use the window.open command and send all of these URLs that we've just found out to a new window. And then you can just process through them in your browser nice and easy, because each of these are obviously the images. So, with a bookmarklet, we've built a tool which can scrape all the images from a website without having to install anything, without having to process through an external party. Okay, that's Bookmarklets 101. Now let's see what we can really do with JavaScript and web-based tools. So we're going to look at building custom tools. Bookmarklets are great, but they do have limitations, particularly when it comes to processing data and extending a little bit further. Now, I should also caveat the code here that we're looking at for the people in the crowd that'll be whether it's JavaScript purists or modern JavaScript developers. We've just gone with the absolute fundamental and bare bones. There are a number of ways and more efficient ways in refactoring. That's not the intent for today's talk. We're looking at how we can create our own tools so we can get more out of our job requirement. And like I said, minimum viable product. What do we need to do to just get the job done? What are we comfortable with? So why JavaScript? I talked about bookmarklets, and that should tease us into why JavaScript is so cool. It's got a low barrier to technical setup. There's no Python environments. There's no Go environments. You're not setting up RStudio for the programmers out there. You just put it all in one file, and we all know HTML files. And the construct is on the right there, HTML, cascading style sheets, which you don't even need. They're just there to make things look pretty. And again, do we need them for what we're trying to achieve? It depends on your job, depends on your planning requirements. And then the JavaScript, that's the behavior aspect. So HTML is, again, the scaffolding, and JavaScript is what you want it to do. That's the behavior. So the barrier to entry is you can copy and paste flat files and share them around. And that's a pretty cool thing. You don't need to explain to people how to set up Python and run a Python command or a Go command. You can just send them a HTML file, they double click on it, and it loads up in their browser. That's something that's universal, works everywhere, and you get an instant GUI. Now, command line tools, absolutely, deep data processing, that's where those other languages really come into their own, because and we definitely advocate for that, is deeper processing, more structured handling of data, and more robust methods around your functions for errors and getting really into leveraging that for long-term sustainability. But some people just want a GUI, click a button. It just makes life so much easier. And if that's all we need to achieve our task, then that is the intent. It also gives you the ability to rapidly visualize results. It's a browser-based aspect. It just displays right there for you. There's plenty of charting and things like that we can do, visualization with tools and plugins, but realistically, it can just throw it all into a browser, and that's easy for people to read. And it's very transparent with what's happening as well, because you can see under the hood. We know through our OSINT skills that we can pull apart network browsers, and we can analyze what it's trying to do. And then seamless deployment into web hosting. I mean, everywhere hosts, it's a flat file, HTML file. That's super easy to be able to use, and we don't need to worry about complex environments. Everywhere that hosts websites will host HTML by default, and as part of that, JavaScript will run because it runs on the client. Now, there is server-side JavaScript and those sort of things, but we're just focusing on, again, the OSINT side. So requirements-based development. This is where we start to get into what I like to call inbound and outbound. There may be other vernacular for it, but what we're looking at here is defining what are our requirements. And the first one is an outbound aspect where we just want to process some inputs from the user more effectively. And an example of that, which we're going to go into, is URL string manipulation. So we've all seen the tips on Twitter and the OSINT community on how to manipulate strings to be able to say do a search query or create when the interface or the GUI doesn't provide what it needs, and that's the exact example we're going to go into with Facebook. We can use string manipulation and create some tools to go and do that. And that's what I call outbound, because we're sending the request out. We're just creating a window. We're not expecting anything to come back for us to process on our systems. Inbound in that case is where we're talking about that. And that is where we're scraping data. We're going out to a website or a resource. We're going to say it's an API. APIs are beyond the scope of this chat, but that's where we start to get our real benefit, particularly for client-side JavaScript. Scrape and process data for deep analysis and fusion. That's where we're going out, grabbing that information, bringing it back in, and we're doing something with it. And so that might be website scraping to visualize results. It could be to feed into other systems. You might be creating middleware. It depends on what your requirements are. But I'm just going to call out those two ideas, outbound and inbound. Like I said, there'll be other terminology for it, but we're trying to lower the barrier to entry with this talk so people can get across the concepts. So let's look at outbound. Great for taking an input from someone and creating efficient outbound requests. That's the crux of it. Examples: you want to process bulk user IDs for mutual friends in Facebook. I mean, that's a really simple one there, where you want to have, you don't have commercial tools, you're remaining terms of service compliant, you're not scraping data. You want to just go and quickly open a bunch of URLs. We know how to construct the mutual friends URL. We just want to go and do that nice and effectively. And we can do that by just spawning some tabs, which automatically manipulate the URL for us. Another one might be bulk search engine lookups. Yeah, we can do Google custom search engines and we can start to look at those methods. That's great too. But what if you're searching a bunch of forums or other areas where you can't do it using a custom search engine, or you want to have that granular control to, say, manipulate the URL to do the search query as opposed to the custom search engine, because the website may function in that manner. And that's where outbound requests work. So how do we do it? We create a HTML page, we take the input from the user, we loop through those inputs. In this case, the input's going to be target user IDs that we're going to look at. And we just launch a browser to open the request. That's it. That's a general concept of what we're going to do. Okay, what about the tangible? Let's look at an example. We've set our requirement. I want to search for multiple keywords on a user's Facebook profile. Google custom search engines don't work because Facebook's not indexed for a person's profile. But we want to be able to quickly see if we have a set or a lexicon that we want to run against a profile, and we don't want to have to go to each one and type out each word. We want to be able to copy and paste a series of words. What's the solution? Just build a quick tool that takes a user ID of the target and a keyword list, and we construct the search URL for each keyword. Okay, so what's the key thing there? The search URL. We want to take the user ID, or we take this URL, facebook.com/profile, put the user ID in, and then we need to amend the keyword. So these are the two inputs in red, and that's what we're going to look at right now. So if we come over to target ID, I'm just going to show you how this works, and then I'm going to get under the hood. We're going to go and we're going to take Mark Zuckerberg's profile, and we want to search across his profile for, is he talking about SANS? What's his thoughts on OSINT? Today's news, and America. Okay, so we've got a series of keywords, and we might have this as our lexicon that we just copy and paste. Now it says open mutual friends, it's just an error there. But what you can see is I've just spawned a series of URLs. And okay, so he's got some results here, and all I've done is create new tabs based on my search requirement. So there's today's news, nothing about OSINT, and he's got a couple mentions or some stuff about SANS. So that's cool. What does it look like under the hood? It's as simple as that function there. We are taking the input, like I said, the HTML is the scaffolding, this script is the function. So we're going to take the input, being the user ID, we're going to take the keywords and then we're going to cycle through them. Now the code will be available after, but just to break this down, the user ID is that first input box. We're then putting all of the lines in that text box into an array. We don't want to get too deep on this. And then we're going to cycle through that array. And all we're saying is, hey, open a window, which takes in that URL and takes in each one of those lines as it goes through, and just pop a window open. And we saw how that worked. Super simple. I had a requirement. If you have these templates, and the templates are available on our website now, you can just spawn these up as you require, and you can just change this URL. It could be a Twitter search URL. It could be anything you want. It could be a 4chan search, and you can start to do keyword and lexicon searching with a click of a button. Let's look at another example. Let's keep rolling, and let's look at what's my next requirement. Quickly process a list of Facebook IDs to review mutual friends. Solution: build a tool that takes a user ID, have the target list as IDs, and just construct the URL. Okay, pretty simple. We know that this is the URL we need to construct for mutual friends on Facebook. We need the base node, and then we need the edges essentially, which is the user ID number 2. So we could do that manually one by one. And if we have a list of 40 IDs to check, it's going to take us some time to change that for each one. We could do some spreadsheeting and things like that. Let's just build a tool that we can press a button and off we go. So this time I'm going to start with the code. And if you see the difference between this one being the first demo and the second one, the only thing that's changed is I've changed some ID numbers, is the URL. So now we've got a template. Remember the concept, dry, don't repeat yourself. Use repeatable code. And so here we are. Let's see what this looks like. I'll just close these out. If we take one user ID in this demo here, this is the second demo. We're going to take the user ID, and then we might have a series of other IDs that we want to quickly check. Okay, we can just go open your mutual friends, and I can just now work through my tabs. Okay, there's some mutual friends there. There's some mutual friends there. And I can now work through and I can identify quickly. And you saw the efficiency we've created there. Now you start to throw in some scraping or some collection there or some review processes, and you're off. Bare bones tool. You could develop it in 5 minutes, and it's going to save you hours on the other end. And that's the idea of what we're getting at with outbound tool development. Okay, let's get into inbound. Great for taking inputs and scraping data. Remember, now we're focusing on how do we bring stuff into us. We want to fuse that within our and analyze that within our control. Examples: scraping multiple news sites, and you want to fuse that information potentially for sentiment. You want to get a little bit more robust in your automation. And I think there's some talks later on today talking about automation and where this sort of inbound approach will play a role. Capture data from multiple websites to validate information. Look at what's my name. When Micah's great tool from GitHub to webinize that, for lack of a better word, we can simply just put some JavaScript scaffolding around it, and it can go and bring the data in and process it so it's visualized. And then we can look at some really easy to use extensions. How do we do it? You'll be very familiar with this process by the end of this. Create the HTML page, take the inputs, you loop through them, scrape the data, and now we're starting to process it. So we need to do a little bit more, and we're going to cover off on some of those things at a very conceptual idea. And then we need to display it to the user. So we've got a few more things we need to do with this. We're not just creating URLs that are spawning. We are now going a little bit deeper, but not so fast. Client-side scraping on JavaScript is challenging. Why? Because of cores. Now, this is a more technical concept, but cross-origin resource sharing. It's a mechanism that restricts, say, myself building a scraper that will go out to every website and bring in the resources from that website. Because what it does is it denies or sets what the origin should be. It restricts resources coming in from another domain. And you'll see there, when what's called a same origin policy is set, if I'm loading a resource on server A, and I want to reach out with my JavaScript to go and scrape it to bring it back in from server B, being, website X, it's going to get denied. Now, some sites will allow cross-origin. So it'll say, yep, you can bring that in. And this says, yeah, you can take my resource. That's the idea there. So I just want to call out why sometimes client-side scraping in JavaScript is challenging. How do we get around it? We can do things like proxy infrastructure. And this is super easy. So we've touched on why CORS restricts a lot of direct scraping for websites. We can build a Cloudflare proxy to bypass what that means. Now, to do this, it also reduces the level of attribution to the client, because rather than going directly out to the website from our resource, we're going through a proxy. Now, when you register the proxy, there's still going to be attribution there and IP addresses and who registered the account and all those sort of things. But it can at least give you a little bit of standoff. So when your request goes out, it goes through a proxy. To do that, there's actually a really cool bit of code out there where we can go and create workers on Cloudflare to do this for us. Create an account on workers.cloudflare.com. We're going to walk through this, and you just copy the code from that particular URL. And you create a worker on Cloudflare and you paste it. And I'm going to show you how to do that now. So let's jump on to Cloudflare. And when you're on that workers area, what we want to do is go and grab that code. I sent the URL there, but it's going to be available after. And it's also referenced in the deck that you're going to have. But there's this code base called CORS Anywhere by Zibri. It's this amazing bit of code where you don't need to know what it's doing, essentially. Copy and paste it. Now, as you advance your skills, you're going to go and read it. You're going to understand it. You're going to make sure it is not, creating attribution issues or passing off any of your data in real time. But we can grab that, and all I want to do is just copy that, go over to a worker, create a worker. And this is just to show you that while it looks scary, it's a couple clicks of a button. Paste your code in here, click the save and deploy button, save and deploy. And this is all free for a level of traffic. When it's ready, that's what it looks like. Doesn't look like much happened. But now when I click send, you'll see over here that it gives me the response. Okay, so the usage then, it gives you this URL. That's now our proxy that we're going to take. So if I open that into a new website, every process I do through there is going to process as or through the proxy. And you'll see there, it just returns the website, but it's processing through this worker. Okay, so let's move on from that. So we've got the basic understanding of the concept. We don't need to worry too much about the technical side. That's just what we're setting up with that worker. How do we build a web scraper? Pretty simple. We look at the DIY principle. We set up some proxies. We create a scraping function. Now we're creating the scraping function so we don't repeat ourselves in the future. We create the inputs, which we've done with the previous tool. Super easy, a little bit of scaffolding. And then we iterate through either the JSON or the HTML. And then we just display the information. So that's the rough concept. To build our first scraper, don't sweat the code. There's so many templates out there. You can start with the templates, get the thing working, and start to figure it out along the way. You can actually do that without knowing any code. If you're comfortable and you trust the source of the code provider, you can just start changing the variables, such as the URL that you're scraping, and get after it. And then over time, you can teach yourself how to actually do stuff with the data. So don't sweat the code. Create your proxy, copy and paste the template, and then handle your data. What does that look like in reality? This is where we're getting a little bit in the code, and we're gonna look at some of the what it looks like. And so the first one is get the input from the user. That first tag you'll see is an input, so we take that and we're just going to assign it to target URL. Then we create a button to scrape the data. That's just going to trigger the action, and you'll see there on click it says get data. Then we process it. Not going to walk through every single bit, but we've allocated that proxy that we created from the worker that you saw. The next stage is we're just using this get command as part of JavaScript has a library called jQuery, which makes using a lot of functions super easy. Now there's different schools of thought of people who like and don't like jQuery. For us, we're just trying to achieve an effect. So let's use what is there and what is easiest to get to where we need to go. So we can just do $.get this URL. Like I said, we're just using foundational JavaScript. Is just saying, get the value of that input I've just done up there. Send it to this function in data, and then we can just display the information. And that's how we display it, or where we're displaying it in these two areas. Okay, live walkthrough. We've created the worker, and this is the URL, what we've created. I'll show you the code. We've got our output area where we've got raw text and the HTML, because we might want the HTML source code to process and store. And then we've got the function. We're going to get data and we're going to work through it. Again, not a super detailed programming lesson, just to show you that you can copy and paste that and go and do what you need to do. This is what it looks like once you've saved it. Now, you'll see it's just a HTML file. I can go and scrape the OSINT Combine website now, and here's the source code. I can process through that as much as I need to. And this is, I can render it. I can just render it within my own browser so it displays locally as well. There's attribution concepts and things to consider there, and malware. If the website you're scraping is bad stuff on it. But this is how you can do it. How could you scrape Tor? You could look at Tor proxies. Now, there's significant considerations there, but this is where you can start to flesh out what this might look like if you're building out your own tools to do things quickly from trusted sources. So let's get into, what do we do with the data? We capture it. We're going to handle some HTML elements. So here, again, all we're trying to highlight is we're going to take the source code that we took, and what we're going to actually do is create what's called a DOM, document object model, and that's going to allow us to process through it. And in this case, we're going to take all of the, we're going to create an array of items, and we're going to cycle through them, and we're just going to display them. And what we're trying to do is create a scraper that just grabs the images. We saw how to do that with Bookmarklets. This is just creating another level where we're going out and we're scraping from one point out to another, as opposed to visiting the website and using a bookmarklet. Again, don't sweat the code. JSON. JSON's an important concept. We all know how to do it in the browser. So it stands for JavaScript Object Notation. You've had plenty of talks and everyone should be very familiar with what it looks like, but it's a lightweight format for storing and transporting data. When we read JSON, we might like it when we're scraping because it's easy to work through and we can convert it to tables. But for programming, it's the golden nugget because it allows us to work with data more effectively. And it's easy to understand. So JSON syntax rules, it just works in a name value pair. Data is separated by commas, and you'd be familiar with it. Curly braces hold objects and square brackets hold arrays. Again, the concepts, that's what it looks like. And what we're looking at there is we've got the JSON object, and then we've got the array elements underneath, which are the bits that we want to work through and iterate through. So how do we handle it? We need to review and understand the JSON structures. We need to handle the data, and it's as simple as that. The $.each. For each JSON object, go through, create myself an item, and do something with it. In this case, I'm just saying, log it to the console. That's the idea. It's super easy. It's almost like talking in normal English. A good program or a good script should be in such a way that you don't need comments because you can just read what it's doing. So let's look at a Reddit example. Let's make this practical. Let's look at how do we iterate through and get all of the authors of a particular document or a particular post. We can capture the data. We can cycle through the children because we understand the structure, grab the items and look at the author. And then we can grab out the actual authors that way. Again, the code's there. Let's just go and take a quick look. This is what the, let me just refresh that quickly. I'll come to Reddit and I'll say, okay, I've got this post. I want to scrape all of the authors from it. On Reddit, if you go to the end of a URL and type JSON, type .json, sorry, you'll get the JSON packet. Okay, you could copy and paste that and put that in a table, no dramas. What if you want to cycle through different posts? Grab that URL. I can come to my scraper, paste it in here. And what it's gone and done is cycled through each of the JSON packets and just extracted what I needed. And you see how easy that is to display. We're going to get under the hood to have a look in a sec. These are the objects though. Whilst I've got the authors there, what I was working with was each object was the data. And then I had the children underneath that. And then under that, the data, and then the author. Every JSON packet is going to be different, and it depends on the programmer and how they built the system. This is where you need to review the data packets and start to manipulate them. But what that looks like under the hood is this. Same deal. I've got a text area. I've cycled through, well, I've gone and I'm using my proxy. I've gone and grabbed that URL, which was the .json file because it presented as a JSON packet. In this case, I've just done one process. That's all I need to do to process it as a raw object. What I've done in the underneath bit to get the authors is I've just gone to the sub elements, being item.data.children after I created that element. Again, we're a little bit in the weeds, but we want to talk about the concept of how we iterate through different parts and what we do as a concept. And it's that simple. And you saw how we can display the data. So now we can do logic like I can take in a series of URLs. And if we just, funny enough, copy and paste the code here for how we take in lines from a text box, we could make each line a URL. And we could copy that code over here and just put that as a high level loop function to go and process 100 URLs and extract every author from 100 URLs. And all of a sudden, we've created significant efficiencies with looking at who is engaging with content. We could then grab that data and feed it into visualization tools. You could use it to automate, in this case, the authors that are coming out to do searches on other platforms. The world is your absolute oyster. And that is what we sort of wanted to cover off on. Now, request variations. This is just to show you there are other ways to do the $.get, and the $.get is actually doing some of this under the hood. There's fetch methods, there's limitations and pros and cons to each of them. The idea here is just to show you that there's more to it, not to get into explaining every different bits and pieces, because these methods will become familiar if you go and learn JavaScript yourself and take this to that next level. But they're there, so they're in the back of your mind when you see them come up and you're like, well, that's different to what I just learned. There's just other ways to do it, but these are the common ones. Okay, now you know what is happening. Let's just get back to making it easy. Okay, so we've gone through, we've got a rough idea of how it works. Let's get back to making it easy. We're building out a basic code generator, template generator to just do everything we've done there. So all you need to do is put a URL in, the proxy, if you've decided to create one, decide what you want to capture, and it'll create the HTML file for you. So rather than sending around a .py file where someone needs to have Python infrastructure or environment set up, you can just send it around and it can run in any browser. And hopefully over time, we start to contribute more to, potentially the OSINT community, some of the cool tools that come out there that, make it easy for people to use. And also now when you're using web-based tools and things are happening super quick, you'll probably have a better understanding of what they're actually doing. And it'll be available soon. We should have it rolled out next week for you, and it'll be available on the website. But what's next? We can extend the code template for your logic, and this is where we can start to take that further. We can iterate through websites and URLs like we mentioned, sub URLs as well. So if you look at scraping links on a website and then process each of those, now we can start to build out our own maps of websites and content. Create daily tasks, create meta search engines. The best part though is working with APIs, and that is definitely for a deeper discussion. And we have a curriculum coming out on how to do that with web-based tools, which I encourage you to sort of check out when that launches in the next month or so. because that's where you're going to extend it. And there's some great content and authors out there. I know Justin Seitz has a great package on how to use APIs with Python. You can take those concepts and apply them to JavaScript as well. So they're all things to sort of consider. Then we look at post data. There's other things, and how do you replicate authentication? Looking at some of the classes yesterday. How can you take some of those concepts of browser requests and extend them out? Development tools. So what are some of the things I need? You got a code editor. That's what you need. You can also just do this in Notepad. You don't need anything for for HTML and JavaScript. It's literally a flat file. And when you save it, the browser's going to open it and interpret it. The browser does that for you. You want some cool icons because you want those things to look pretty, and that's Font Awesome is a great place for that. You want to be able to use tables. I'm a big fan. Get data into tables because then you can save them out. You'll see on most of our free tools, particularly on like the Reddit and the What's My Name, just so you can export them out to CSV and those sort of things. They're templates that already exist. They're plugins and tools that you can just extend. And then you want to look at the foundation. If you want to learn to code, w3schools.com just breaks it down super easy. And so does 30secondsofcode.org. And just in the interest of time, I'll just give you a look at what they look like. This is the Visual Studio Code. It's free. You can download it for every platform. That gives you your environment to work with. It's got a thing called IntelliSense, so it gives you ideas as you're coding. This is W3 Schools, great resource. You can start with HTML. It takes you progressively through what you need. If you just did these bits up the top here, you'd be well on your way to creating some really awesome OSINT tools. 30 Seconds of Code has some great tips when you hit those roadblocks. And then these are just some of the other tools that we mentioned: data tables, tabulator. And what you can do is they'll tell you how to copy and paste those. So you'll see here for tabulator, it gives you what you need to do. You can just copy and paste this in and do what you need, and then you'll get the idea as you're going along. In summary, JavaScript provides a simple way to create tools that you can share easily and can be used easily. And that's the idea. It can be used easily so we can create efficiencies with what we're doing. We can create templates so you can reuse code quickly. And then the rapid collection and processing of information without the complex environment setup. That's the key one. And looking at, as part of our program development, even if you're looking at it from a managerial perspective, what skills do I have in front of me? What are their desires, and how can they create efficiencies? Can I give them a little bit of rope to show me what they can do? This is where it sort of plays a role. Okay, we're right on time, so we're going to hit it on the head there and take some questions. So, John.
Hey, Chris, fantastic. That was a stellar presentation. I think you've blown some people's minds there. I love it. Just mind-blowing stuff for real. We do have some questions. I don't think we'll get to these all, but let's just take a look here. One of them was, is there a limit to the number of characters that can be pasted in the URL bar? This is going back to the early part of the talk when we were using the bookmarklets. No,
not at all. You can set that limit, and that's the fun part. You've got complete control when you're building your own tools. So no, absolutely no limit. The more data you throw into a browser's interface, the more chance it's going to get clunky. Once you get above 10,000 characters and those sort of things. But to be honest, go for your life, and you'll be able to find where that limit is throughout your development process.
Fantastic. And that leads a little bit into the next question, which is, say the target is managing the web servers, going through the logs. It seems like this might be something that would really stick out, but maybe not. What are your thoughts on that?
Right. So, I mean, attribution should always be a key consideration in any OSINT consideration. Now, I guess the question is talking about, okay, if I'm processing or loading 1,000 URLs quickly, absolutely. Right. If the platform has rate limiting and you've just gone and loaded all those URLs, then absolutely. Okay, so how do we solve that? We look at a very bit of simple code that has in JavaScript, it's called set timeout. In PHP, it's called pause. Or sleep, sorry, and Python will have the same thing. So you set the timeout to just be every 1.5 seconds. In fact, you could even create a random timeout. So it does it between 1 and 10 seconds, and it looks completely normal behavior. you can build your logic on the top of this scaffolding and framework that we've sort of done. And happy to talk about that probably, on the more technical side. And like I said, we've got a whole curriculum on how to do that coming out. So, so hopefully that'll be of some use to people.
Great. Yeah, I think that's great advice. Any sort of dark web shop scraping and stuff I've done absolutely have used timeouts, so it just isn't just pounding that website, right?
Yeah.
All right. A question about the mutual friend tool, and if it can access friends lists that are private.
No, all we've done is taken what is a publicly available URL, and we've just built a process around automating looking across those mutual friends. There's nothing sort of nefarious about that. It doesn't use or go and look at private friends lists. But you could build a tool which automatically opens tabs to go and open the friends list of each, but we're not accessing private friends lists. No, we're talking about just URL string manipulation.
Fantastic. All right. Well, thank you, Chris.